is connected with Ingenious Films LLP.
Yeah, I told you that this morning. He's not connected.
Oh, you did?
He's not connected with the second subsidiary of Ingenious Films. He's connected to 250 subsidiaries, and that's only for one overlapping director.
Yeah. Oh, it's just unbelievable.
Well, I haven't told you that bit yet, other than in brief. But if you're going to interrupt me with things that I already know, it's going to disrupt the video. I would be better off doing it.
George, I'm not going to say anything. All I'm saying is I've got the list up, and I'm absolutely astounded.
Yeah, well, you would be. And, anybody that's operating at the cabinet level, or is operating at the level of Martin Sorrell, or Princess Anne, or Nick Clegg, or any of the people around Nick Clegg, or any of the cabinet members, then they will be involved in crime at this level. And all you need to do is to find the name of the director that's a grandee. Then you click director button, and then just scan down it until you find a name that means something to you. And when you find that name and you know what they've done in a geopolitical context, then the game of exposing what they do, rather than parroting back what the local Argos has reported, which is a minor crime, then you can get the truth out about why our country is dismembered.
Of course.
Yeah. Okay, so this morning...
I'm not going to disturb you, George, I'm just going to let you talk.
No, there'll be a lot of places where I come in and I ask you, have you heard of that person before, and in what context? Like we're talking about Alistair, what's his name? Campbell.
Yeah.
He's a villain, and he now runs the Company Check website, as far as I'm aware. It may not be the same person, but there is a grave risk of that, because he had his nose into everything that happened under Blair's regime, and most of the villains that we talk about are criminals from the Blair regime who have passed on their skills to the Lib Dem coalition with the Conservatives, who got the skills originally from Mrs Thatcher, because she learned them in Finchley Road. And when you understand the make-up and the constitution of the cross-party fraud, and the student union and the union leader frauds, and then the inference of that infiltrating local councils, every financial institution on the globe, which you tried to tell me are not Rothschild owned now, because the Rothschilds are much cleverer than using their own names. That's why they breed with other families. They might pop the name behind a hyphen, but because it's got such a resonance now, and because they have warmongered for centuries, they're afraid that they will be shot. They will be lined up and shot as war criminals and genocidal leaders. It's a very real threat now that they have impoverished the whole of Europe. And they're pretending that that is an accident, and that that Putin needs to pay for it, when Putin is just a junior member of the Zionist team for 4 or 5 decades, as you know from the Hill and Clark disclosures in New Zealand. Anyway, I'm off the topic, so let me get back. So I showed you how Michael Grade's functionaries took us into Zebedee Productions, ITV Studios Israel Limited, and ITV Holdings in the Caymans. And I was beginning to tell you how they have made a joke about the link to Israel, and the company that they've named in Israel that is forging that news ITV studio partnership is called Reshet. Now that is a joke at the reset joke. That's what the Americans call the crashing of the economy in 2008. Yeah, it's a deliberate, premeditated policy to asset strip all of the corporations and all of the viable entities upon which these bastards sit as board members and get massive salaries that are undeclared. And using these techniques that Michael Grade is a master of, they launder the money to distant continents, and it is immune from regulation. It is a really clever master plan. Let me tell you that Michael Ian Grade does that in a company called Grade Limit with Lady Francesca Mary Grade, where they're changing their roles as directors or secretaries on a 5-year cycle, like Putin and Medvedev do in charge of Russia. They take turn around at being director, and the other one is then the secretary. Medvedev becomes the PM and Putin becomes the president. It's really clever if the ordinary people that are supposed to be electing you or funding your company through the shareholdings are unaware that they're being defrauded either democratically or financially using the leaders of the nation. And so what Lord Michael Ian Grade of Yarmouth and Lady Francesca Mary Grade do is that they rotate in the director and in the secretarial roles, and then they appoint for a 3-day period in May 2005 Form 10 directors and Form 10 secretaries to do the dirty and to take the money into distant lands and distant havens. That's the first of many slides, and we got on to, I'm just going to list some companies. Ridley Scott's involved in a thing called WRG Worldwide, and that's why they've brought his film and the Bada Bunga news about the explosion of the volcano in, is it Iceland or is it Greenland? I can't remember which one.
Iceland.
Okay. And you know that the Icelandic economy was crashed by batards like these. Yeah. Ridley Scott is a very creative person compared to Michael Grade. Michael Grade is destructive and greedy. Ridley Scott entertains the public. His brother committed suicide because when they get involved in bad cabals and bad networks, some of the people genuinely get a conscience about it, and that's why people like this Blair spin doctors need to go on rehab. And you know, when Tony Robinson, the chief fundraiser for Labour, is accused of making a joke at the Wardhead's expense, it will not take long for him to become an alcoholic. Like who's the man that plays Darling and the equivalent of the Field Marshal in those comedies? Stephen Fry. Psychiatrically unstable, clinically depressed, which is a shield from any form of accusation that you are laughing at the world's war dead, which they are unequivocally is what they're doing. Okay, so I now go on to the Independent Press Standards Organisation, CIC, whom Michael Grade's in charge of. You know, that's the standards for the British press that is entirely owned by the Rothschilds, by Reuters, by the Murdochs, by Sky News, and they know all about the religious fraud that was the introduction to this yesterday. Okay, I can reel off some of the members: Baroness Elizabeth Margaret Smith of Gilmore Hill. Yeah, they're relatively anonymous. Some of them are local names up here in the borders: Dame Ruth Runciman, Lord Colnbrook, Lord Geoffrey Johnson Tordoff, Lord Michael Kun Chang, Mr. Andrew Gerard, Professor Ian Newark, Professor Leslie Howard Rees, Professor Robert Pinker, Rear Admiral Nicholas John Wilkinson. This is Ponzi schemes and financial frauds right through every sector of life, and it takes in another company called Ben Ainsley Racing Holdings Limited, where Michael Grade was appointed director in 2014. So they're still doing the little transfers, and they're still stealing from every one of the taxpayers and the innocent citizens who are having their pensions crashed because of these.
George, one of his associations is called the Jewish Film Foundation.
Yeah.
Listen to this.
Yeah.
It's got cash of £19, a net worth of £4, and liabilities of £15. This is unbelievable.
Well, that's just a shelf that they're not using at the moment. You've had that explained to you. So that one they pull into play when they need to avoid tax. They've got very little money at the bank, so they tell you that it's been a bad quarter. The money's in the Caymans already, using the methods we've already explained, so you don't have to pay tax on it anywhere in the world. And when I show you how many directors they've got, on each of the Ponzi shelves, you will be stunned. So I'm now looking at Phoenix Film Partners, which is a particularly vicious one. We'll come back to it at the end. I was just working my way through it until I discovered the role of a person called McKenna in that, and I'll relay that to you later on. I used to work with McKenna's at Imperial College London. They were in the pharma sector.
You knew Terence McKenna's brother. Well, you didn't know him, but you have a picture with a fish, and he's standing beside you.
Yeah, I cannot find that, and that is something that I do not have time to discuss, because it's the false news vents that I now know are false news vents. It's a guy called Kevin Barrett that interviewed Gordon Bowden last week, and it is a crock of shit. Yeah,
really?
Yeah, it's just there so that they can pretend that they're doing something about the geopolitical manipulation in the Middle East. That's the man that invited Peter Eyre to the Congress on Depleted Uranium just before Ahmadinejad left office. Yeah, it's all a global team plan, and people like Peter Eyre ought to be ashamed of themselves. They come across as visionary, people. The people that they have introduced me to, including Gordon Bowden, are minor shills in the Rothschild empire, and they are all financial profiteers in their own way, and their family members are involved in all of the tiers of deceit, and it's ever so easy to pick it apart when you dedicate your life to it, like I am doing. I do not trust any of them. They have launched campaigns of false news about the killing of Jacqueline Chang's brother.
Yeah.
And when you realise that that is potentially a false news thing, and that you've been circulating that for weeks, and when they leave your company, it's because you exposed that Jacqueline Chang is an entrepreneur rather than someone who's fighting for her brother's freedom. She now charges you to sign petitions.
Fantastic.
Yeah, well, it's not fantastic, it is tragically sad that Peter Eyre, that pretends to be a freedom fighter but was a weapons salesman for Alan Bond in the past, that made me ever so nervous. Yet they're well informed on narrow sectors of life, and they will rant about that without going for the jugular of why the world is brutalised perpetually.
Just for a few quid in the bank, it just disgusts me, George.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm nervous about the Able Danger movement and some of the people that have been introduced to me. Almost all of my friends on Skype have come from those sources. And when you hear all the little disputes that they have, when their conspiracy theories are interrupted with insight into a massive financial fraud that involves the brutalisation of innocent countries in Eastern Europe, then they ought to be ashamed of what they're doing. Yeah, that what they're doing is publishing little news vents, and they're publishing horrific statements that this person in Kelso, who's prepared to take sides and fight against Rifkind and fight against Zahawi, but they accuse the people that are in the investigative journalist sector of being, sexually deviant in some way, and it is quite pathetic. I want you to understand how Michael Grade is a leader of our country. He's a leader of the Zionist Hollywood networks, like Arnie Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're all come out of exile in Europe as Nazis or Jews, like the Warner Brothers did, and like the Warner Brothers did, what they've done is to change their name en route. And if you're an actor, you get to change your name twice, because you need a stage name. And it's ever so useful if you've got multiple registrations in the business addresses. So Phoenix Film Partners, we'll come back to that later, but you can see that they've got Waterloo Film Partner 1, Waterloo Film Partner 2. You've got all sorts of famous names on the listings. Lawrence Anton Rabinowitz, Mr. Kirsten Hannah, Katharina, I can't see the surname there, the McKennas, the Pews, the Keowns, and a lot of these people are just celebrities, the Dunlops, O'Haras, And if it's in Hollywood films, you can bet your boots that there's a joke at the public's expense, because the next company that I found is the David Lean BAFTA Foundation. You know the films that David Lean made? Lawrence of Arabia, with all the jokes in that we've shared in the last few days.
With our mate Nigel Farage.
Yeah, that's right, Farage, the false plant in the political sector. You've got Sir Jeremy Israel Isaacs, Mr. John Francis Brett, John Anthony Smith. Remember, I'm telling you that ASCIO is one of the intel agencies from Australia. And ASCIO is almost always, when we report something as a crime on these systems, ASCIO then takes charge of it, and Mr. John Smith becomes the CEO or the person who's in charge of the fraud. That's Mr. John Smith, who is almost impossible to find on the business registry, because John Smith is the commonest name in the world. You get it? And it's also a brewery. But this is the one, the David Lean BAFTA Foundation, not the World Wildlife Fund subsidiary that Michael Grade is in charge of.
That's dissolved, isn't it, that company, foundation?
Yeah, well, Lord Richard Samuel Attenborough is on the board, with Mr. David Putnam of Queensgate. That's David Putnam, Chariots of Fire joker, the Mr. Bean man, who used to be my boss at Sunderland University, where the Vice-Chancellor is a fat bloke who's unfit for work for several decades, but gets £300,000 a year to be absent from work. I forget his name, but that's relatively irrelevant. So you've got Lord Bernard Delfont, Lord Max Rain, Mr. Alan Yentob, you remember that name? Formerly head of the ITV and probably the BBC as well.
Was BBC,
Okay, then you've got First Leisure Corporation. Then you've got the Lifelong Learning Foundation, because I've just explained to you that a couple of these guys are involved in the University of Sunderland, in its governance. They're both Jewish, they're both media leaders, and they are both imposing the fees on those really poor Geordie and Mackham students up in the northeast of England now. Dr. Christopher Charles Peter Brooks, Dr. Paul Duncan Hartley, couple of Horsfields, couple of Drakes. The names are huge. The dynasties that run the world for centuries do not give up the ownership of the world easily.
No.
That's why they brutalise, and that's why they kill, and that's why you and me are in a very dangerous position, because we have the courage to openly declare what they're doing to Britain's youth.
That's okay.
Then they profit from charities, and they profit from acts of God in the childbirth sector. So the SOS Cerebral Palsy charity was, Lord Michael Grade was a director on that between 1995 and I cannot see the retirement date. He's running that with relatively small beer people that I've never heard of. Then you get Search Call Again, Mr. John Anthony Smith. I know a John Anthony Smith who's a professor of pharmacy and has sat with Baroness Blackstone in judgment on me at a couple of job interviews. It may not be the same person. Then you've got a famous name through Gordon Bowden's relatively trivial disclosures. That's Instant Companies Limited, who with Company Secretaries Limited are notorious for their thin blue lines and their laundering frauds. Okay, and the other one that's here with this company is Swift Incorporations.
I've heard of Swift.
They're all over Michael Grade's transcript. Miss Ruth Anderson, Swift Incorporations on First Leisure Interco, as if that might be a series of shelves. Interco. It is just ruthless what they're doing.
Instant companies have got cash of zero, a net worth of zero, and liabilities of a zero.
Well, that's just because you're looking at the emptied shell. If you look at the corporate timeline, you'll see that all the corporations before 2008 line up on a block, and then when they crash it, they become new corporations elsewhere, and they're lined up in a block beyond the thin blue line in 2008, where these instant companies were used to defraud all of the companies, but not to defraud the directors. The directors then are immune from taxation and regulation because the money's out of the country into the havens. Okay, so I've now gone on to the New Millennium Experience Company Limited. You remember how worried we were about the year 2000, how we were going to have the internet crash on us?
Yeah. Y2K, yeah.
And how successful the Millennium Experience has been for globalism.
Yeah.
Yeah. Since I left the country in 2004, the country has gone to rock. David Noel Lord James of Blackheath, where I used to play rugby, they're not allowed to change the rugby pitch because of the elite houses around it. He uses Hallmark Registers Limited in the New Millennium Experience. Sir Alan Cockshaw, the Honourable Sarah Antoinette Francis Sibel Morrison of Supermarket Fames, Hallmark Secretaries too. Geoffrey Leonard Hawkins, I don't know whether or not that might be the Abel Danger connection. Sir Miss Carol Teagues, we remember talking about yesterday. They were the reformers and the translators and the printers of the Christian Bible. Miss Jane Margaret Chappell Gill may not be related to the Gill who was the director at Manchester United, the fraud for several decades, and on the Olympic commissioning bodies and the Football World Cup commissioning bodies with Princess Anne, David Beckham and Martin Sorrell. They're all lined up. It is completely illicit. WW Realisation 8 Limited. Could you hazard a guess at what WW stands for with your context and insight into history, John?
Not the World Wildlife Fund. No,
World War Realisation. It's their ultimate dream to hide their financial shame. Yeah. Mr. Alistair MacDonald Ogilvy, the links between pharma and the royal family. You remember that discussion with Gordon Bowden? They're using Mr. Richard Mark Hatter. That's a joke about Alice in Wonderland.
Mad Hatter,
and you understand the joke about the yellow brick road that leads Dorothy into West Berlin and the Berlin Wall, which is right in the middle of Eastern Europe. It's not in West Germany at all. It's an archipelago like the city of London, so that they cannot run financial frauds from out of Eastern Europe, where they are still defrauding the impoverished citizens in the Eurozone and in the fraud that is the EU creation and the Eurozone project.
So George, listen, when this video goes public, there's going to be a revolution.
Well, no, it's going to get a lot worse. You're talking about simple frauds that Gordon Bowden has already described. Wait till you get to the end.
It gets worse.
Okay, we've got CA 2010 PLC. Now, I've got no idea what CA stands for, but CA in terms of a what is it when you call map?
It's California.
Yeah, that's right. So that's where Arnie Schwarzenegger and the Warner Brothers went to. You remember that?
That's it.
Hollywood, famous place, North by Northwest. That's where the Abelard Reuchlin office, where they wrote about the Pizzo fraud and they used to sell the PDFs, were taken over by T-Mobile, the religious jokers that are a globalized company that sell mobile phones that can be hacked so that Andy Coulson and Rebecca Brooks can thrive in the government sector. Okay?
Well, George, you've just reduced T-Mobile shares by about 50%.
Well, everybody should know that they have no secrecy. You know, the whole of my life I have been monitored in my own home, because they know early in my career that I am a completely innocent man, and that's why I'm facing divorce proceedings and the loss of the home that I worked for, because I've taken up the cause to save the world and to return it to prosperity, and I am not going to give that up lightly.
No,
Yeah.
no, me neither.
That's why you and me are being approached now by the SNP, because they know that the main villains are in the Westminster building, as we confirmed for the House of Lords business registers this morning, and we've confirmed for Zahawi's geopolitical and war crime frauds from the House of Commons. Let me just tell you about Vertex Law Company Secretarial in brackets Limited, and their director's Lee Christian Johnson. He's been a director at 32,310 companies in total, and he's resigned from, i.e. crashed, 31,476. He's a director at CA 2010 PLC, and with him on the board, along with Michael Ian Grade of Yarmouth, is Mr. Brian James Hallett. Got no idea.
We've been writing to.
No, that's not Greg Hallett. That's not the one who stays at Stepping Stones near Zahawi's constituency either. It's a different Hallett. But now that they're dropping Halletts into the news willy-nilly, it makes it ever so difficult to find the genuine historian and his output, because there are so many counterclaims. And that's why the Google personnel, when they leave the Prime Minister's office, they go and work for Google. Like Jimmy Wales, the man who wrote Wikipedia, they go and work for Google. And all of them are in the same world ownership cabal, and they operate from the tax havens with the Bransons and the, what's the name of the Doctor Who family that we were talking about yesterday?
It's Scott.
Yeah, they're the ones that were in the Canadian Governor General's role, and they were in charge of that for the whole of World War II. It's the Tennants.
The Tennants.
Tennant family, yeah. Okay, so when you look at the cash at the bank for CA 2010 PLC with all those big names, their net worth is minus £60,000. So you're not going to have a big tax bill that year. And you've got famous names like Derek Guy Chappell, cricketing name, Mr. Gideon Benjamin Cecil Franklin. You remember Benjamin Franklin, the leading Freemason, and how they used to try and hit him with lightning, but he understood physics, so he was able to invent the lightning conductor and keep their Babylonian towers safe. And then you've got Gregory Peter Bowen, Keith Marshall Robinson. Now, if Robertson or Robinson comes in, there's usually a major financial criminal behind that. I've told you about John Robertson Wright, who's got massive holdings at the HSBC and at the Arab British Chamber of Commerce, who lives within 2 miles of me, and some of the worshippers at the church on Sunday were prepared to lie and say that he did not exist. Others told me exactly where he lived, in the tiny village. And it's just amazing how the people locally think, oh, my little bit of fraud is okay, but I must denounce the energy companies for putting my bills up.
Exactly.
It's twisted. The way that they think and the way that they behave and lead their children into the same sectors, it is just illicit. Okay, so then we go to, it's still Hatters, still York Place Company nominees. Michael Grade uses more of Gordon Bowden's corrupted laundering tools than any other individual I've ever looked at his directorships for. And you've got Fuller's, Robinson's again, GB Petroleum Consultants. So this is one of the companies that I went into, tracking down a Robinson, Marshall Robinson Limited, and it takes you through from CA 2010. Let me just reel off the spoken wheel journey that I made for this companies that are nearer the periphery of the wheel than CA 2010, which is run directly by Grade and Lady Grade. So Keith Marshall Robinson, he's a director of his own company. De Kaiser Europe Limited. Then Keith Marshall Robinson, director again at another tier in the Ponzi's, And then you get into Elite Sports and Tall Ships Worldwide Limited. You know the tall ships races that we have?
Yeah.
And they visit ports a bit like the Commonwealth Games do. Now, the Marshall Robinson Company is run from Owlswood, Hogpits Bottom, Flondon, Hertfordshire, HP3 OPU. Marshall Robinson Limited, the registration number is 087 45981. The short name for Marshall Robinson is Professional Legal. Does not say Mr. or Mrs., does not give us a gender, but it says Professional Legal Services Limited. Year of birth unknown. In other words, this is a corporation and a fraud pretending to be a director on one of the tiers.
Yeah.
And that's how you get lost and it's registered for trading from 12th floor, 6 New Street Square, New Fetter Lane, which Gordon Bowden and I have droned on about for several months back to back, as being a laundering centre for relatively minor frauds. The director overview, let me just read what he's got. The combined cash for Keith Robinson, which is the man without a birth date or without a short name, but across the page he appears as Keith Robinson, 24 appointments at 23 active companies, has resigned from 98 crashed companies. The combined cash at bank value, where Keith holds a current appointment, equals £8 million, with a combined assets value of 17 million and liabilities of 4 million. So this man, who is not actually a man, he's a corporate tier, is a multi-millionaire, but he cannot possibly pay tax. But then you've got another registered address for a Keith Marshall Robinson with a different director number, care of Sherard Solicitors. Yeah, the law enforcement sector. I'm going to make a video on law enforcement this weekend which will shock you to the very core. The concept of law enforcement is a joke. They are criminals par excellence. And that's when I told you that I was looking into the name of the man that used to be Tony Blair's spin doctor and is the director at Company Check and the CEO at Company Check. I keep forgetting his name. Campbell.
Campbell.
Campbell the spin doctor. He is in the legal sector. He's all over the legal sector at fraudulent laundering companies. So this is Keith Marshall Robinson, care of Sherard Solicitors, 7 Swallow Place, London, United Kingdom, W1B2AG. Then we go on to just a little bit of entertainment for you now. Michael Grade is Lord Michael Grade, and he is an entertainer. You know, he's there like that guy Maswich, who was the head of BBC Light Entertainment during both wars and launched the Zionist programs like Dr. Finlay and all of those things that we used to watch in the children hour, where they used to wear the uniforms that they wore in the death camps that we were discussing yesterday, with the stripy pyjama like uniform on that led them into the death camps. Okay, so someone else who was executed allegedly by the New World Order was a chap called Michael Jackson. No, this is not General Sir Mike Jackson, who is on the board with various companies with Rebecca Brooks with a K, the Prime Minister's criminal partner. This is Michael Jackson, the persecuted pop star. Now, I believe that the person that was persecuted was one of the many body doubles for Michael Jackson, because when you watch him hanging the baby over the window, the person there is quite pathetic. And when you look at Al Fayed's behaviour in charge of Millwall Football Club and the way that he was prepared to treat his own potentially daughter-in-law and his own son, i.e. have them culled so that he could keep his place in the world's power base, he's got a statue of Michael Jackson outside Millwall Football Club, and he's smiling like a Cheshire cat, because he knows that Michael Jackson was actually in Jacksonville in the States, and he has now taken over the same football club from him. If you look at the images that I've got on my timeline on my website, they think they're being really, really clever, but it is just...
George, just give out your website.
profgeorgelees.revelation/revelations, and look up the New World Order timeline, Dark Forces, and you'll see El Fayed, that was on the board at Lonro with Tiny Rowlands and all of the other financial criminals. And what I've got, when I looked into Michael Grade's listings, you then get the lists of Zionist interests in America, in California, that we've just speculated about, the CA corporate label. Okay, so Michael Jackson's registered director number was 910-322-906. His registered address is apartment 8N, 173 Perry Street, New York, USA, New York 1001. Yep, always a Freemasonic number or two to throw in.
Yeah.
His companies were Beat Productions Limited, 2005. He did not resign from that when he might have died in office, as it were. Film 4 Limited, Grade Link, 124 Facilities Limited, Grade Link. In other words, those are the two interlocks that got me into his directorial listings. The others are more sinister, because the sound companies and the record companies are alleged to train their people to be operatives and to just be minions for the New World Order. And you know all about the Rolling Stones joking about the Beatles and how some of the Beatles got decency and tried to come away from it and lost their lives because of that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So
well, they were trained at Gordonstone.
Yeah, it's it's just amazing.
It's all
because your history is into how the world might be run if it was run by tyrants. You've got insight into everything that everybody needs to know, except the financial stuff, but I'm delighted that you're learning to use it, and you can now discriminate between a relatively innocent corporate player who wants to keep jobs in our country, who wants businesses to thrive, like the owner of Butlins that I talked about the other day. Yeah, I used to work for him last summer, and he's...
Are we talking about Forte?
No, I will not give his name. He lives in the building Stocks, so we talked about the other day.
Yeah.
And when I talked about him, and the previous owners of Stocks were Victor Lowndes, the Playboy magnate, and Philippe Edmonds, the Rhodesian cricketer who's a scamster and a profiteer and a weapons trader and a friend of Bredenkamp and an enemy of Princess Diana, who was an enemy of landmines trading, which is what Bredenkamp does. And that takes us back to Robert Maxwell and Oxford University Press, and the roles in munitions and in spying in Eastern Europe, where perpetually the West brutalises the place for profit and power. The other companies for Michael Jackson, the pop star, are Photographers Gallery Limited, in brackets the EMI Group Senior Executive Pension Scheme Trustee Limited, EMI Group Limited, 4 Ventures Limited. So that's just a little aside. Michael Jackson was allegedly killed by his anaesthetist. I used to work in anaesthetics departments. I've had to drop out for conscience reasons from anaesthetics departments and leading academic journals in anaesthesia, because they will not give sub-Saharan Africa the medicine and the public health that Britain has enjoyed for 200 years already. It is completely illicit. It's not criminal to not share your assets with innocent developing countries, but you know, these people are leaders of society and they should know better. The death rate in complicated operations in childbirth in Liberia is 1 mum in 12 patients. They have no anaesthetics. When they get the cesarean, they have to chew on a stick, or they get dissociative anaesthetics like ketamine, which is a mind-bending drug that in Australasia they are now trying to get approved for psychiatric treatments, even although in the labs it's used for as a model for precipitating psychiatric emergencies. That's how twisted the profiteers are in every sector of life, and that is why I resigned from the intensive care journals that I used to be an editor on.
Yeah. Listen, Jules, they've been named and shamed.
Yeah, well, I mean, what they do to cover up the assassination of political figures and to allow people like Lord Lucan to escape, and they pretend that people with their legs blown off are fully conscious and capable in engaging in a conversation, but because those disclosures were made by Peter Eyre, I don't know whether or not they lost their legs in Afghanistan. But they certainly did not lose their legs at the Boston bombing, because they would have bled to death within a few seconds.
Exactly.
And the whole thing that you get in the daily news is just a scam to allow the profiteering to continue.
It's a comic.
And the managing editor of one of the journals that I resigned from is mentioned on Michael Grade's listings further down. Yeah, it's not necessarily the same person or his family, but these are very elite families, and they keep going for generation after generation. So this one caught my eye because it's a registration on one of Grade's listings of Elaine Hutton, and she's registered as director number 915355847, and her ID is Mr. Elaine Hutton. Now there's nothing very vicious in that, it could just be a typo, but if that is Deirdre Hutton, who's a friend of one of my local worshippers, who's on the Walter Scott Foundation and used to be the head of our local council, and runs the local council and is in charge of training the next set of local councillors that include Rory Stewart, that would not let me ask any more questions of the people in the referendum debate, but he forcibly came up and almost pushed me off my seat every time I tried to put my hand up. I had to agree then to showing him the questions that I would like to have asked, and he failed to ask them. Now that man is also a cover for Rory Stewart, who was Tony Blair's governor in Iraq in the transitional regime. That's Rory Stewart, the MP for Cumberland, where blind King George used to live.
Yes.
Right, so
Incredible.
You knew about Ingenious Film Partners 2 LLP, and so did I, because Gordon Bowden, our mutual friend, was brave enough to explore it for us, and he explained to us that Mr. David Gower, the England cricket captain, was on the board, that Charles William Booth, the famous Booth political name, there's a Christian Friedrich Hess, there's a Charles Walter Arden Bott, there's a Christopher Connor McCann. That may be nothing to do with the young girl who disappeared in Spain and had most of the British police trying to find her again just at the beginning of this year. There's a Richard Henry Whitman Morecambe, could be nothing to do with the comedy celebrity. There's a Mr. Martin Frederick Adair, could be nothing to do with the Barclays magnates who avoided losing their jobs when the man who was the boss at Barclays who got let off scot-free? Bob Diamond. Yeah, he got his 20 million bonus and all his pension deals, and he was probably given a free plane trip across the Atlantic by Richard Branson. Then on the board of Ingenious Film Partners 2 LLP, you've got Mr. Ryan Joseph Giggs of Manchester United fame, Mr. Stephen Irvin, Mr. William Victor Peter Bullingham, Miss Christine Rostrup Jensen, Waterloo Film Partners 1 and 2 for a Thin Blue Line exercise, Kim Tobias Gerke, i.e. the Gherkin joke in the City of London, Lawrence Anton Rabinowitz, Lord Clive Richard Hollick, Lord Michael Ian Grade of Yarmouth, Lord Robert Peter Richard Riff, Arno Robert Lannick, Biran Hal Il Mehmet. Remember you met the Arab delegation telling you that they were trying to save Britain this morning?
Yeah, yeah.
This is the Arabic delegation in the Ingenious Film Partners listing. So you've got Lanik, Mehmet, Bulbul Barrett, Councillor Quentin Noel John Marshall, Count Andreas Eric Douglas Bernstoff, Dame Clara Hedwig Francis First, the Hedwig name in the J.K. Rowling jokes, Duandarpal Singh, Dejan Jilishikik, and have you seen the investigative journalist Dejan, the man who knows, in Hungary?
No.
Hungary, rather. Yeah, everybody's got their little media plant and their little fraud family, and all of it goes to the hub of the wheel. So, and it continues. I've got a second page of Ingenious Film Partners 2 LLP, which is Gordon has already told us about. Cyril Hornby, remember the toy trains? John Devan, Right Honourable Lord Sainsbury of Preston Candoy. Mr. John Digby Goodwin, you remember the banking dynasty?
Yeah.
Mr. John Edward Balfour Colnut. Mr. Leslie William Melville of the schools and the Australian Governor Generalships. Mr. Leslie Wilson Canavan. Was he Irish sectarian or was he a union leader? Mr. David Nicholas Merry, that's the Lord of the Rings joke. Mr. David Paul Knox. Mr. David Paul Murray. Mr. David Pius Jude Fee. Mr. David Robert Joseph Beckham. Posh is on the list somewhere else, but I did not find. Yeah, David Beckham, the England football captain, and the World Cup profiteer with Princess Anne alias Lawrence. Mr. Emil William Ivanhoe Heskey, Mr. Owen Jess, Mr. Eric Ezra, Mr. John Christoph Robin. You get it? Christopher Robin, Mr. Eric Jean Christoph Robin. Mr. Evan Mervyn Davis, Welsh rugby player, died very young. You remember my pathology theory? Mr. Fergus James Rupert MacDonald, Mr. Fuluwasha Omibi, Mr. Francis Healy, Mr. Francis Paul Henri Pai Herves. That's like the Hergé's Adventures of Tintin joke. Oh, and here we go. I don't know whether this might be a relative of you, but Mr. Francis Rob Patterson with one T. You got any celebrity cousins?
No, not that I know of.
Francis Rob. Take a look for him on Wikipedia. See if you can get some dirt addition in our next video. Mr. Hein Clemens Rudolf Joseph Jürgen. Mr. Heinrich Curling. Mr. Henrik Gobel. That could have sinister connotations if these were wartime profiteers. And this is another actor. You remember the Auf Wiedersehen Pet program about casual labour in Germany? Defrauding the German economy. The bombastic and fightable Irishman was played by Mr. Henry Richard Francis Elphick. Mr. Herman Carol Hintson, Mr. John Raymond Cohen, Mr. John Reid, union leader again, Mr. John Reeve, academic colleague in New Zealand, head of the toxins unit, Mr. John Reginald Mallet de Carteret, Mr. John Richard Richmond McConnell, links to London and maybe Plum City, Mr. John Vincent Peter O'Sullivan, Mr. John Webster Alexander Garrard Cole, Old King Cole. If it's in poetry or legend, it is a joke at the world's expense. You should know that by now. With all the religious stories I've been telling you. Mr. Hugh Malcolm Charles Goldsmith. That's the Duke of Westminster's kind, I believe. The richest family in the country. Mr. Hugh Patrick Sloane. Mr. Hugo MacLeod Morrison, supermarkets again. Mr. Hugo Redding Heath. That's the unacceptable face of capitalism denouncer. And then you've got one of his cross-party friends, Mr. James Francis Osborne. Mr. James Harley Bayliss could be related to one of those religious characters that is on the Sky TV religion channels and gets a massive global audience for waving his hands around like the Pope and the Archbishop of Canterbury on speed. Mr. James Julius Christopher Birch, Mr. James Lee Carragher, another Liverpool football player, Mr. James Peregrine Welsh. The Welshes are big banking dynasties, and they're also named in my favourite film, It's a Wonderful Life, about financial fraud and people who are trying to undermine society. Peregrine is another one of the jokes about the Lord of the Rings team. And I could go on and on. I've got another page: Morrisseys, Blands, Kitcheners, Lennons, like the football manager at Celtic. I know that he was doing the dirty in the laundering sector. He does it out of the West Country where they had the floods last year. Ridsdale, and it's his family and his family members that do it. But Celtic were defrauded by a number of companies, and Baron Reid of Celtic is just a villain. He gets involved in the murders, the assassinations, the helicopter crashes, and you should see that his home has been built at the public's expense, like Winston Churchill's. Then you've got a couple of footballers: Gary James McAllister, Gary Winston Lineker, Mr. Matthew Robert Maxwell, Mr. Matthew Rupert Freud, Mr. Max Sebastian von Ditcheman Durand, Mr. Matthew Patrick Cahill, Gordon Bowden's enemy one day and friend the next. You know how the worm turns. And then we're still on Ingenious Films Partners 2. You know the man that used to be involved in the Plebgate scandals and was, believe he might have been the Speaker in the House of Commons, the Right Honourable Andrew John Bower Mitchell. Top of the list.
You're getting annoyed, George.
Well, yeah, it does make me quite angry. Sir Alexander Ferguson. That's Sir Alec Ferguson. Sir Bruce Dugald MacPhail, Sir Christopher Leslie George Malaby, Sir Crispin Henry Lamert Davis, Sir Paul Ruddock, Sir Robert Peter Wilson, Sir Thomas David Guy Arculus, Sunil Tulsidas Kakad Talai Nov, the Honourable Benjamin Vavasseur Fisher, the Honourable Harry St Clair Fane, the Honourable John Edward Richard Harbord Hammond in the news again just this week.
Exactly.
And then David Gower's wife, Thoran Ruth Gower, Viscount Hugh Sebastian, and here's a sporting one just for the hell of it: Mr. Michael Patrick Fosbury. You remember the flop that was the Fosbury flop?
Oh yes.
And you remember the films about the Winslow boy? Mr. Michael Peter Winslow, Mr. Michael Roy Hodgson. Do you know who that is?
Glenn.
No, that's Woy, the England football manager with the lisp, with experience in Norway, where fascism thrives, and Quisling was for a long time, before he deserted his country to the Nazis, was the Prime Minister there. Quisling, Lord of the Rings joke. His nickname was Gimli. Then we get on a new, so we leave, that is one Ingenious Film Partners, which Gordon Bowden had already told us about. I've reiterated how Gary Lineker and heroes for British society, how the England football captains, from David Beckham to the current Liverpool incumbent, are fraudsters on the director of a false news company, and they get massive payments as non-executive directors there.
Well, David Beckham needs the money, George, doesn't he? Let's face it.
No, they cannot spend all of the money that they have, and they're in a really dangerous place, because they are stealing now from all of the impoverished citizens, all of the students. The mothers cannot afford to go out and keep their job. I don't know how much posh Beckham is short of when she's looking for a creche to look after her poshly named children, but they are in a really dangerous place when the ordinary impoverished people on the streets realise that they're being stolen from these ruthless cabals. Takes me to Lambda Limited. relatively innocent, but when I saw the names that we mentioned on the religious manipulation in Scotland, Mr. Anthony Gordon Lennox, Miss Dr. Patricia Ann Hodge. Did I tell you that Hodge is the cover name, the new name for the Oppenheimer? That's Margaret Hodge, who's head of the FSA.
Yep.
Then you've got really posh names like Miss Victoria Lindsay Legg Bourke, Right Honourable MP Sean Anthony Woodward, which is an actor's name, Dame Joan Sutherland, that's in the opera sector. And I found at long last, after days and days of searching, one of the potential culprits for sacking academics in Dundee, Dr. Brian Dennis Cox. But that could be the physicist who does the astronomy research, which is actually a crock of shit. Because man never went to the moon, we just created the story when computers were the size of a room. And then at the top corner for Lambda Limited we've got...
And they took a beach buggy with them for good measure.
Yeah, and you could see the footprints under the vehicle when it landed, and it's just shameful. So Lambda Limited, Timothy West, who used to play Winston Churchill in all the movies, Mr. Robert James Sharkey, Mr. Andrew Paul De Rosa, Mr. Anthony Michael Fry, the one who might have rehab because he's in the Blackadder movies, Mr. David Courtney Sushi. You know all about the number of sushis that work for Russia Today, which is a laundering vent used by Mossad and MI6, as Gordon Bowden has explained to you. But you still write to them on RT as if they're going to change the world for you.
No, they blocked me, George.
Yeah, well, and
I can't post comments anymore.
So did Kevin Barrett's, that skinny woman that sits on the stool and pretends to be a freedom fighter. She's a friend of Kevin Barrett, and when I tried to befriend her on Facebook so I could embarrass them with some truths, she refused to have me in her company. And Kevin Barrett has not spoken to me since I realised that Islam is another one of the false messianic religions. His wife is Islamic, and that is why he got the invitations to the Iranian congresses where Peter Eyre went after he stopped working for Alan Bond, the munitions magnate. So Mr. David Morgan Lennox McWilliam, Mr. David Terence Miller, Mr. Mark Shivas, the Shivas Regal joke, Mr. Mark Christopher Baggett, another Lord of the Rings joke, Mellish, Mr. Michael Ian Grade, that's another director ID for Lord Grade, Mr. Patterson Joseph, 1T. Now that could be another launch of a new family, because you know that when the name Joseph is associated with a new story, that is a new dynasty. So Joseph and the coat of many colours went to Egypt in the Old Testament, and Joseph and Mary went to from Nazareth to Bethlehem in the New Testament, and they just keep replaying that story with the same characters in it. And when Joseph appears, it's like Hitchcock being in his own movies. So have a look at Mr. Patterson Joseph and see if any of your cousins are bringing the name of your family down. Mr. Peter Charles DeLoe Rogers, Mr. Peter Lewis Hodges, Dad's Army joke. We've talked about the Dad's Army man-wearing joke, where the man is an HSBC fraudster, has massive holdings in the London Stock Exchange.
David Cameron's great-great-grandfather launched the HSBC.
Yeah, so Hodges is a friend of the stock marketeers and is a friend of Lord Grade and his friends. Then you get the James Grant Group. Some of these are academic names like McIntyre and Worsley that have been very close to me in my career academically on both sides of the world. Mr. Ian John Wilstonholme, you remember the football commentator? Kenneth William Lawrence, don't know whether or not that's connected to Her Royal Highness. Michael Ian Grade again. Russell Grant Lindsay, Mr. Kenneth William Lawrence. Then you get the World Wildlife. Now this is World Wildlife Fund UK. Prince Philip no longer has his name on it, Michael Grade has the gall to put his on it. Mr. Anders Johansson, Mr. Marcus Citron, Mr. Jonathan Porritt, you remember him?
Yep.
Yeah. Jonathan Adair Turner, married to a Rothschild in the Barclays frauds. Yeah, got off scot-free when Bob Diamond was allowed to go to America, and the blame was placed on something called the London Whale for relatively trivial crimes compared to those that we're describing in the following few disclosures. So what I tried to find there is a man called Mark Shand. Mark Shand is a legend. He died in a revolving door, and you know the story about people that profit.
This was a relative of.
It's Camilla's brother. It's Camilla's brother. I had the decency to withdraw my accusations just immediately following the death, but that was the same time as Gordon Bowden was telling me that the Prime Minister's brother, who's a barrister, was prepared to give fraudsters who defrauded people of £5 million in a relatively small financial service sector crime, because they could not access legal aid. They did not even have to appear in the trial, and the Prime Minister's brother got them off. Yeah, that was the week that Camilla's brother Mark Shand, a JP Morgan executive, and involved in some of the other world banks, and involved in all sorts of wildlife scams and charities.
George, what are the odds of being killed in a revolving door? I've never heard of it.
Well, I'm telling you that God has a sense of humour, which is why he launches that massive earthquake on the 1st of April, the day that the French reuse the Poisson d'Avril joke. The fish is a penis. It does not get more basal than that. If you're a Roman soldier, it would be really funny, because the Roman soldiers before Julius Caesar were pagans. When they became Christians, they had to do it, otherwise they'd get topped or crucified. Yeah, and the whole thing, the whole story is turned on its head. The heroes are the villains, and there are very few heroes left because they manipulate the breeding patterns across the globe. In the early days, when you became a Roman Catholic priest, you had to be celibate, so you could not have good children. It's a really clever way of getting rid of the good people in the world. And when you take them to confession and you get them to own up to everything they've done, and then you can immediately release that to Reuters and to the Rothschilds representatives on the stock market, you can see why the Rothschilds were allowed to kiss the ring, not their arse and the ring at that end, but the ring on their finger. Yeah, where they were allowed to handle the banknotes, and the ring was of pure gold of the highest caliber. It's all about the money stream. Okay, so the Wildlife Fund, you've got Lord Michael Grade of Yarmouth, which is also the yacht thing. You must have heard of the expression to be yawl in the elite yachting sector, which Alan Bond was in with Peter Eyre. And the explanation that I gave at the beginning of this morning's video about the definition of the word the Lord and Yahweh, yeah, you can see that it is just a perpetual laugh at the world's innocents who get down on their knees and pray for their souls and give up their cash in the collection box twice every Sunday. If you put it in a little envelope, you get tax breaks for the church. As if they were paying any tax at all. And the people just swallow it, because the people have been brought up as decent people, and their mum said, you know, you must get christened because I want you to stay decent, and you must get christened in the church that represents the one true God. And there are hundreds of Christian denominations now all fighting for everybody's cash. And when you see the decrepit churches that they leave behind when the cash flow runs out, it's quite tragic because it defaces the whole town.
All I can say, George, is thank God I never got christened.
Oh well, I mean, I got a very rigid set of moral guidelines that I have never breached in my whole life. You know, when I make an oath or a pledge to someone, I will never break it. Yeah, and that is what is wrong with the world. That the people that lead the world, that actually wrote the text, and we've talked about Moser, the chief statistician, and his links to Moses, and coming from, you know, that little pool and that wicker basket in the bulrushes, and then becoming the world's governor. It is just a superb master plan to take control of the world. But the only way that it's going to be turned on its head is by innocent activists like you and me talking about it amongst ourselves and amongst our circle of friends. Like when I go for a walk now, I get people coming up to talk to me. A lot of them are keeping an eye on what I do, and I mentioned the visit of the female Rothschild on the...
The same thing happened to me this morning. Funny, we were just talking about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So in a way, you can embarrass them, and in a way, you can get them to come forth and explain, because they know that there is a God now. They know because Lord Patton and all the royals have had their cardiovascular accidents, and you know, as the people begin to tumble at the head of the political parties like the Better Off Together movement, he was buried early this year with all the quislings that are stealing from our innocent country of Scotland at the trough at his funeral. And it's just quite illicit that, you know, that every one of the political parties pretends that they're indignant at what the others are doing. There is
the incredible thing, George, is the way I see it is this, in a nutshell. They throw a few pennies out to the sheeple, but if they just, I mean, they've got so much wealth you can't even comprehend. But if they hadn't been so greedy, they never would have been sussed. They've been too greedy for their own good, George.
Well, Roycliffe knew, and Piso knew that he would be found out.
Yeah.
Piso had vanity, and Gordon Bowden had vanity. Gordon Bowden used to hit on people for spelling words wrongly or for leaving his name out. He was a glory hunter. And I've got no time for the little bastard because he's deserted the people's cause, and whoever pays him, he's gone back to lick their arse. I hope he's listening in to this. Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Same with
listening in, George. You know.
same with Peter Eyre. Yeah? Peter Eyre has already had a cancer. He knows what's coming to him. And I believe that he will come crawling back to try and make his name good. And Greg Hallett used to talk about that all the time. Deathbed confessions. When they know, and I remember a man at worship on Sunday who used to be the head of the Conservative Party in Britain. And he came to the church and he knew I would be there, and his wife is really ill and he had to leave early to visit her. But he was decent enough to have a chat with me, and I told him about Zahawi's crimes. And he said, that's unbelievable. You could not have that happening in the House of Lords because we've got an official register, and that is the head of the Tory party at some time before Lord McAlpine. You know, I don't know whether they actually believe that, but you know, when you heard him say it, but
George,
you heard,
I can't believe that every single policeman and every single politician is corrupt. There must be a few that understand what's going on.
well, no, it's only at the top of the chain. You know, the innocent locals here just do what they're told. They do what they're told because they're desperately keen to keep their jobs. If you're in the council, you have to do what you're told, and it's bad for every citizen in our region, but they have to sit and watch the chief executive get a massive pay rise. And you know, then when you realise that the crooked law companies are in league with John Lamont, an advisor on law and a former solicitor in the totally corrupted solicitors firms all over Scotland. The reason I can't get a solicitor is because I know how criminal they are, and I know how many tiers of Ponzi shells there are. And when you say to them, you've got this company called Shelfco, and you're very proud of the fact that you do business in the Caymans and in Bermuda and in the Channel Islands, but you're unaware of the fraud implications of that, they say, yes, we're only here to process your divorce case.
Yeah.
And then they give me the money back, because one of their director realises that this man is in a position to take the world back to decency, and we're going to lose all of our illicit income stream, which will be quite shameful for my entire career profile.
You know, the incredible thing about these people, George, is this. They've doomed their children and grandchildren to a miserable world just for money. I can't get my head around it.
Well, you see, it's just the way things have been brought up, and because of when I was a boy, everything was amateur. You could not compete in the Olympics if you were a professional. If you were a rugby player, and like the Welsh standoff, whose nickname is Jiffy, I forget his real name, he became a professional in rugby league, and he was defamed for it. In those days, Britain was capable of winning the Football World Cup. England got to the final a couple of times, semi-finals most years. Scotland got always into the finals, and they got narrowly beaten by teams of the magnitude of Brazil. The country then had self-respect. It had the get up and go to put on a tracksuit without a safety helmet and without a flashing light on the end of your nose, as if you're an incompetent joker. And we had nothing to help us get the ball over the posts when we took the kick after you scored the try. Now they've even imposed the tee, which is a golf and a cricket joke. You know, it's all of it is linked into those stupid secret societies and Masonic networks that you and I know all about and denounce on a daily basis. The Masons do not know the damage that they wreak on their own children, but they're gonna.
So they don't know. So they're just ignorant. They don't understand.
Well, no, they're quite happy to let the Duke of Kent manipulate the world, and to let Lady Francesca Mary Grade steal from public assets, and then get them to pay an inflated BBC, license fee. The whole thing is just twisted. And when we talked about
George, I never in my life ever owned a TV license. Now, when my TV went out 10 years ago, I had the bailiffs around, and I told them a few things.
We've gotten a wee bit off the point, and this is already an incredibly long video. Can I just get to the...
We round it up, George.
No, we've not got to the horrific bits yet. So lady, I'll just... SDG secretaries, you've got another example of company directors, Temple Secretaries Limited. The grades are using all of the companies that Gordon has mentioned. Every one of them. In Bristol, in the boiler rooms, in Finchley, right behind the Ritz, all of them are being deployed by these Zionist media leaders. Okay, then I found Patrick Anthony McKenna. Now I found him on the board of one of the companies for this guy, and I saw that he had, someone like 400 to 500 companies against his name, and almost all of them had been crashed. So I had a little closer look, and his director number, it's Patrick Anthony McKenna, 906 990 748. Registered address 15 Golden Square, London, United Kingdom, W1F9JG. Director status, companies verified, and then we go down. The combined cash at bank value for all businesses where Patrick holds a current account equals 103 million. Combined asset value of 531 million, and liabilities of 421 million. Short name Patrick McKenna, year of birth 1956, director ID, I've already given you that. Okay, 27 appointments at 27 active companies, 200 resigned appointments, 25 appointments at 25 dissolved companies. So only 27 of the 250 companies you've got are left in existence. Let me tell you, the next page, which you'll see when I publish the video, is entirely taken up with the names of all of these companies, and they're Ponzi schemes. So you've got Ingenious Broadcasting 56 Limited, Ingenious Broadcasting 1 Limited, Ingenious Broadcasting 49 Limited. Yeah, so Ingenious Films, and Ingenious Films are mentioned here. There are numerous shelves. And you remember how many names we read off of celebrity names that are registered with Ingenious Films LLP 2?
Yeah.
There are 200 of them in total, all running under this guy's thrall. Then you have a closer look, and then you see what I've got. If you look up Patrick Anthony McKenna after we finish this, if you type that into your search box now, you'll see that when you look at his companies, they're all lined up before 2008, and then they all shift into thin blue lines beyond the financial crash, and that is exactly what we're talking about. You will be stunned when you visit his listings, and when you've seen.
Are we talking about Patrick McKenna Limited? So many
Patrick Anthony McKenna.
Okay.
So it's Anthony THONY and McKenna MCKENNA.
Same as Terence McKenna. Yeah. Okay.
And who's Terence McKenna again?
I have a picture of you with.
Oh
Terence
yeah.
Quite a while back, and I thought that was weird. Patrick Anthony. No, it's just.
But you're not telling me in which sector of life Terence McKenna is a famous name to you?
He, my God, there's so much. I sent you one of his video YouTube clips.
All right, okay. So has that come up for you?
I've got Patrick Anthony McKenna.
Yeah, and have you entered that into company check?
Yeah, but it's got Anthony Patrick Associates. That's what's come up.
Well, let's finish the video. Anyway, what he's got is a massive number of Ponzi shelves. Okay, and then I found Phoenix Film Partners LLP. Now, on Phoenix Film Partners LLP, it's very unusual because there's 215 directors. All of them are still active. You know how when you look at the timeline for these registers, so this is Phoenix Film Partners LLP, registered address 15 Golden Square, company number OC 339129. Now OC might mean it's a registered charity, but I'm not terribly sure. The net worth is 107 million, and every one of those 215 directors is still live. That's a massive salary base, a massive salary commitment. If the banks are just funding this as a gesture to their friends, when you see some of the elite names are on it, then you'll know that they are friends of the elite bankers. It is incredible, because I've just shown you that this guy McKenna has 250 companies. Each one of them, if it's like Phoenix Film Partners, has got 215 continually active directors drawing down a salary every year for doing no work at all but manipulating the false news and manipulating their profiles as celebrities or financial sector criminals. Okay, and let me just go to the next page. Oh, it's locked my computer, but it's not going to let me see the next page, which is particularly vicious. And they are monitoring every word that we say. And so can you see the magnitude of that? Those last two slides, 250 Ponzi shells, 215 remunerated directors on every one.